Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to another live episode of this program, The Left Lens. As you can see, I'm joined by Scott Ritter, former UN weapons inspector. Really glad to have you back, Scott. Before we get going here, be sure as you're coming in to like the stream, make sure you're subscribing to this channel and supporting in all the ways that you're able. Find all those links in the description. But let's get started. Scott, how are you this evening?
I'm doing great. Thanks. Yourself?
Doing all right. Well, there's a lot to get to. We're approaching this 1-year anniversary of Russia's special military operation in Ukraine. A lot has happened. Now I've been seeing a lot of rumblings in the Western mainstream media about Russia's offensive. A lot of alarm bells being sounded, a lot of estimations on when it's going to happen. I've been under the impression that this is already started and that there's been a lot going on the battlefield. What are your thoughts about Russia, where it's at right now? Is it on the offensive? And how would you how would you describe what's going on the ground right now?
Well, there's a saying that's popular. There's a meme about it and all this. FAFO, FAFO. Now, I'm not going to use the proper first word, but fool around, find out is the concept. NATO and Ukraine, which has allowed itself to be used as a proxy, fooled around, and they're about to find out. When this war first started, when we first talked, there was a lot of confusion, especially on my part. I'll be the first one to admit, man, it didn't happen the way I thought it was going to happen. I thought when Russia goes to war, Russia goes to war. Russia rolls in, steamrolls, pounds, etc. And it just shows, here I am, a Russian history major who spent my entire life studying Russia. And apparently I was unable to grasp the notion that Russia could actually be serious about loving Ukraine, that they didn't want this war. That, I knew they didn't want it, but again, war is war. I'm a Marine, and you fire the green flare, I'm off to the races, baby. It's all the training kicks in, you do what you got to do, and it's going to get bloody, it's going to gut it, and you're going to win quick. The Russians didn't do that, and so there was a lot of confusion about what the heck was going on. Now that we've had a year, I think we can look at the first month of this conflict from February 24th until roughly, we'll call it a month and a half, February 24th till April 1st. And I think there's a lot more clarity now. Russia never intended to steamroll Ukraine, never intended at all. Russia was in a position where it felt it was compelled to force Ukraine into accepting the peace that Russia was offering before the war. Basically, a modification of the Minsk II agreement where the Donbass would have autonomy, but now because Ukraine pushed it too far, it would be independence. Crimea would be forever Russia, and Ukraine would never join NATO. Those were the Russian objectives. Now, to get Ukraine to that, Russia made a military move. But this was a military move designed to create an impression as opposed to actually destroy. Even though Russia said we want to demilitarize and denazify, it was clear based upon the negotiations that took place, they weren't demanding either one of those. In fact, the final negotiation on March 6th that paved the way for the April 1st meeting in Istanbul, Russia pretty much said, you can have your army. We're not going to demilitarize. You can have your army. You can have your government. We just need you to never join NATO. That's all we need. And that these agreements were made. Now we read into what the Russians did. For instance, convincing the Ukrainians that the Russians were serious. Russia had taken a lot of territory. It was threatening Kiev, had taken a lot of areas around Kharkov, Sumy, and suddenly the Russians withdraw. And a lot of people are going, that's because they're weak. That's because they got beat. And I didn't buy into that, but I was like, well, they say they're withdrawing. I took it to mean that they are going to look. I said from the beginning, they had insufficient resources for the task. And now we know why. And people are going, why did they start with 200,000 people? And now we know why. Because Putin and the leadership was very concerned about sanctions. I mean, today we can sit here and at the time I was very confident that Russia would beat the sanctions. But, I'm sitting thousands of miles away. I don't have my pulse on the Russian economy. I think I do. I think I guessed right. But, I don't have to pay the price if we're guessing wrong. Putin gave a speech last year where he said, my guys were telling me 15, 20, 25% contraction of the economy. Hey, that's a lot. 25% contraction. And that, remember James Carville advising Bill Clinton back in the 92, it's the economy, stupid. And that holds everywhere. It's the economy, stupid. And Putin ain't stupid. And he knew that there would be economic problems. And so he couldn't shock the system too much. Already they were anticipating an economic shock from the sanctions. Now they have to go through this special military operation, not a war, a special military operation, which means there's no mobilization. You're using a peacetime complement of forces. Why? Because with an economic shock, you can't shock the population with a mobilization and going to a war footing. Because now we know the war was not popular. The Russian people weren't buying. I mean, they understood about Donbass. They understood about the threat posed by Ukraine and all that, but they weren't thrilled about going to war against Ukraine. And so there was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of hesitation amongst the Russian people. And if you shock them with 25% contraction of the economy and mobilization early on, you could get some problems. And I know there's people say, well, Putin's a dictator. What does he have to fear? He ain't a dictator, people. He's a democratically elected president. And he has to be concerned about the electorate, just like every other politician. So he couldn't shock that system. He had to play it slow. So they were trying to get them to the negotiating table, and it worked. I mean, in retrospect, if you take a look at what the Russians wanted to achieve and what they almost achieved, this was a brilliant operation, flawlessly pulled off. I mean, there were some mistakes with the military going forward without flank protection, etc., but they achieved their military objective, which apparently was to get Ukraine to the negotiating table to bring an early end to this conflict, which was always Russia's objective. But when April 1st came, Boris Johnson came also. And Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister, put the kibosh on the peace deal. Now, we also have found out that apparently the Ukrainians were negotiating with the West and they were never serious about it. We have the head of the Ukrainian intelligence service saying it was a sham anyways, just like everything else was a sham. But the Russians believed it was real. The Russians thought they were going to get a peace treaty. The Russians thought that this war was going to end early on. And this changes everything, because what the mistake that was made by the West was misinterpreting the Russian withdrawal as a sign of weakness, that Russia had somehow been beaten. No, Russia was playing by its game plan. Russia got the Ukrainians to the table to end this war early. But it didn't happen because NATO said they're weak. NATO said, we're going to double down now exploit Russia's weakness. And now we come to phase two, where Russia said, well, if you don't want a peace treaty, we're going to focus on liberation of the Donbass, which they were doing. A lot of people don't realize that in June, the Ukrainian army was defeated, literally defeated on the field of battle. They were getting crushed, ground up, spit out, and it was all but over, except that NATO suddenly infused them with tens of billions of dollars worth of military equipment, financial resources that the Ukrainians were able to marry to manpower and create this 70,000 man strike force that they then launched a counterattack against the, insufficient Russian forces, because Russia never mobilized. Russia wasn't ready for that war. Russia went on a special military operation against Ukraine. Russia was not prepared for a proxy war with NATO. And we saw that, where the Russians had to withdraw from Kharkov, the right bank of Kherson. But then the Russians consolidated, and now we get to FAFO. Because now Russia said, we ain't playing this game anymore. It's no longer, we'll call it a special military operation, but it ain't. It's war. And we're mobilizing 300,000 troops. We have another, we don't know exactly how many volunteers came in. Some people say 100,000, some people say 180,000. I'm thinking they probably have a total of 500,000 troops mobilized as a result of this. They cranked up their defense industry. They're firing on all cylinders. They're pouring out tanks, artillery, the most modern equipment. So these 300, 500,000 are getting the best equipment. And they're taking, everybody's like, when's the offensive going to be? When they finish training. When's the offensive? When they finish training. The Russians are actually training the troops to accomplish the task. And but the war didn't stop during this time. Even while this mobilization is taking place, the war is continuing. That same war that I told you Russia was winning in June, Russia was winning in November, December, January, February. Right now, Russia's winning. Look at the casualty figures. These are ghastly, ghastly. Zaluzhny, the head of the Ukrainian forces, apparently admitted to Mark Miley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, 275,000 dead. And he admitted that a month or so ago. The fighting's been even bloodier since then. So I'm guessing that number is up over 300,000. I personally believe that you can add another 50,000 unaccounted for deaths that the Ukrainians don't want to acknowledge. 350,000 dead. Let's reflect on this. We're coming up to the 1-year anniversary. During the entire Second World War, the United States suffered 300,000 dead, fighting Japan and Germany. Ukraine has suffered 300,000 dead in conflict with Russia in 1 year. And by the time this is over, you might be able to double or triple that number. We could be looking at 250,000 Ukrainian dead by the time this is finished, because FAFO, the FO is about to happen. Find out. The offensive has already started. People need to understand that, most offenses don't begin unless you're starting from the start. There's no war, then there's going to be the green flare, and across the line of departure you go, etc. They're already engaged in battle. The Russians have been advancing on Bakhmut since May, and so that battle's never stopped. And there's always been positional battles going on. But now, as Russia starts to release forces into the battlefield, they're carrying out probing operations all along the offensive line. In Zaporizhia, up by Sumy, now they've got things going on, Uledar and other areas. And what's happened is the Ukrainians are having to divert reinforcements here. So they got very few reinforcements, reserves, and they have to go where the Russians are probing. And so the Russians are absorbing, forcing the Ukrainians to commit their reserves, and the Russians haven't even committed their main battle force yet. So they're probing, crushing, identifying gaps. And when the time comes, the Russians are it's just going to be this. It's like watching a tidal wave come in sometimes. A lot of people think of the tidal wave as this giant wave come crashing in. It's actually a surge that comes up. If you look at those horrible videos from Thailand, just the surge comes up. And then it's just this relentless surge that cannot be stopped. And that's what's getting ready to happen to the Ukrainians. A surge of Russian military offensive operations along the entire front will be taking place. Now, the Russians have said they are only interested in liberating at this point in time Russia, which means the right bank of Kherson will be Russian, Zaporizhia will be Russian, Donetsk, Lugansk will be Russian. But the Russians have put a little caveat on there. Back when we gave the Ukrainians the HIMARS, the high mobility artillery rocket system, 80-kilometer range, the Russians went, well, Now it's going to be the territories plus 80, you see, because we have to keep you out of artillery range. We're never going to allow you to fire artillery shells into Russia again. So we're pushing you back for 80 kilometers beyond the borders. Congratulations, Zelensky. You just lost a whole lot more territory. But then the geniuses, they said, hey, America, give us even longer range stuff. So the Americans are talking about giving them this small bomb, this advance at 150 kilometers. Well, all that's going to force the Russians to do is go 150 kilometers in. And now rocket scientists take your little compass, go to the map, get the scale, and then to start drawing the arc rings around the border and see what 150 kilometers is and understand that's pretty much the territory that Ukraine is going to lose forever. That includes Kharkov, probably includes Odessa. This is the end of Ukraine. I think that this offensive is going to begin. It's going to be a surge. And I think, well, it's not what I think. Who cares what I think? Let's talk about what Zelensky or Zelensky thinks.
Yeah.
Both of them have said, I mean, Zelensky basically said, if you don't give me everything I want, this it's over. He said that in an interview to The Economist. Right. It's over. It's over. What does over mean? It means he lost. It's over. And Zelensky has said, if I don't have tanks and airplanes by August, it's over. It's too late. What does that mean? You're going to be beat. They know. They're not stupid. They know what's coming. It's a surge that cannot be stopped. And unless you can pile up a whole bunch of sandbags in the form of F-16s and M1 tanks and Leopard 2 tanks, but they're not going to get those. They're not going to get those in time. And even if they got them in time, there's not enough numbers to actually make the difference. You're not going to beat the surge. You might put up a nice little sandbag wall and say, I'm protected. Nope, the surge is going to pull that through, push through, and you're going to drown. And that's what's going to happen to Ukraine. They're going to get swamped. It's over. Do svidaniya, mama. I don't mean to be too flippant here, but I'm somebody who's been watching this thing just getting frustrated. And you say, well, why are you getting frustrated, Scott? Are you frustrated because the Russians aren't winning quick enough? No, I'm not pro-Russia. I mean, I believe Russia's on the right side of history. I'm anti-war. I'm not pure anti-war. Look, I've been honest about it. I'm a Marine. And I did a tweet that got me in trouble with this rally. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit later. But someone said, are you anti-war? And I said, no, I'm not anti-war. I said, I believe that I love puppy dogs. I love dogs. But if there's a rabid dog, it's got to go down. And we need Atticus Finches out there to shoot them. And if you know the movie To Kill a Mockingbird, you know the scene I'm talking about, where Atticus Finch, the lawyer, is called upon to do the difficult deed of shooting the rabid dog. And then I said, Ukraine is the rabid dog and Russia is Atticus Finch. And I firmly believe that. I think the Zelensky regime is a regime that has empowered the odious neo-Nazi ideology of Stepan Bandera, the national hero. The Ukrainian armed forces sing songs in his honor. We can go on and on and on that. So I have no sympathy for the Ukrainian government, but my God, my heart bleeds for the Ukrainian people. Not the ones in Western Ukraine. Look, if you put up a statue of Stepan Bandera, FAFO, okay? You're going to find out. It ain't going to end pretty for you guys. I am telling you right now, the surge is coming for you. But it's the people that wanted to live their normal lives, the people that went to work, had a job, have a wife, have kids, have parents, grandparents, and they just wanted to live their lives. And those lives are over. Ukraine is being destroyed right now as a modern nation state. That's something I predicted early on. I said, this war, when it ends, there will not be a Ukraine. It's coming true. They've already lost 20% of their territory. They're getting ready to lose another 30%. I mean, it's mind-boggling how Zelensky claims to be the president who cares about the Ukrainian people, but he's overseeing the dismemberment of his country and the slaughtering. My God, 300,000 troops dead. That means that there's a whole bunch of wounded guys too. In modern combat, wounds aren't, a nick, a scar. You're losing arms, you're losing legs, your brain's addled, you're pooping into a bag. I don't mean to be too graphic here, but hey, guys, you get gut shot. What do you think happens? All right, it ain't the movies. Oh, no, boom, you're gone. Brains out. I mean, it's real, guys. It's real. And they're getting slaughtered. They're getting butchered. Not just the Ukrainians, too. The Russians are suffering casualties. Not on this scale, but the Russians are suffering more casualties per day than we suffered in the Vietnam War at its height. And it broke the back of America at that time. But the Russians are soldiering on. But this is just tragic. And what makes it even more tragic is the United States and NATO made this war happen. There is only one. That's why when people say, "Oh, well, we can't let these people speak at the rally because they're pro-Russian." No, 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 guys. We're just calling it as we see it. This conflict is about good versus evil. And let me tell you right now, the evil out there is the United States. The evil out there is NATO. And if you don't recognize that, then I don't want to have anything to do with you. Because if you're trying to pretend that this war wasn't predicated based upon a decision made in 2008 to invite Ukraine into NATO, then you have no clue what you're talking about. If you don't understand the role played in 2014 in the Maidan coup d'etat, don't call it a revolution, it was a coup d'etat, ousting, and how the United States handpicked these people to govern, knowing that they were closely aligned with the neo-Nazis of Sloboda in the right sector, and then turning a blind eye as they declared war on the ethnic Russians. In April, they passed a law calling ethnic Russians terrorists, and they unleashed the Ukrainian army on them. Okay, if you don't understand that, then I don't want to talk with you because you don't know what you're talking about. And that's half the problem here. All the people out there, they're saying, I'm anti-war, I'm anti-war. They don't know what they're talking about. You don't even know what anti-war means. If you think anti-war means pacifism, you don't have a clue about reality because pacifists die. That's the truth. Pacifists get swamped by Hitlers. They get swamped by Imperial Germany. They get swamped by Banderists. Pacifists need people like me who are willing to step up to the plate, draw the line, and say, not one step further, or I will slaughter you, because I am not a pacifist. I'm a warrior. And you want to take me on, you will lose. But I also understand that you have to fight for the right cause. There has to be just cause for this conflict, or else war is just murder. War is murder no matter what. Your humans are killing humans. It's the worst thing that could ever happen to mankind is war. We should never want to go to war. But if we do go to war, be on the right side of history and win. What we're doing right now in Ukraine is evil. It's pure evil. We claim to be the friends of the Ukrainian people. We claim to be their friends, and look at what we've done to them. Yeah. If this is friendship, man, I wouldn't want to be in love with the Ukrainian people because God knows what that would turn into. We're not the friends of the Ukrainian people. We don't care about the Ukrainian people. We put the flags on our social media. They fly everywhere. I see the flag. Really, guys? That's how you treat your friends. You let the U.S. government allow them to be slaughtered on the battlefield. You're destroying. There won't be Ukraine when this is done. How much do you love Ukraine? And the answer is you don't. Want to know why? Because you have no clue what Ukraine is. Anybody who puts that flag up there, I can guarantee you, I could interrogate them for 2 minutes, and it would be clear they don't have a clue what they're talking about. They don't have any grasp of history. They don't have any understanding of the underlying issues. They just put the flag up there because, they're trying to. I forget the term that's used when you project that. That I'm a good person. I'm projecting that I'm a good person. You're not a good person. You're a moron. Moron for putting that flag. Look, if you honestly know the issues, and you put that flag up there because you're sincerely with the Ukrainian people, I apologize. I apologize. You have every right to do that. But the vast majority of the people out there don't have a clue. And I've rambled on. I apologize, Danny. But
no, it's great. It's great that you launched. I think this is a really good place to continue on from. I mean, I am on that side too. I do not believe that all war is unjust, that there isn't some, I do believe that anti-war does not mean pacifism, because pacifism, this just, again, you said it, history. We have to look at it, even just recent history. A lot of people who came into reacting to what Russia engaged in beginning around this time last year, I know we're still about 11 days from the anniversary, but even building up to that, there was a lot of people reacting to what was going to happen. There's a lot of Russophobia, a lot of Cold War fears being drummed up. And immediately, especially the liberal class, but really Americans and people in the West across the board, were taken for a ride. They were taken for a propaganda ride. And it was so easy to just forget everything if they ever were aware of the fact that their governments have been waging the most brutal wars since the end of World War II, especially. But, it's like all that history gone, even recent history. Forget Iraq, forget Afghanistan, forget everything. I know you've been speaking about this in your articles. It's like, yeah, the U.S. killed 1 million plus people. It's not like the U.S. is out of that conflict 100% either. So all the history is forgotten. And then it was like, Russia's bad, Russia's bad, Russia's bad. But here we are now, after all these escalations, hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian people, soldiers dead, thousands of Russians dead as well. And now you have the collective was so unhinged, so unable to acknowledge the reality on the ground. Now they're even talking about fighter jets and having these funny conversations among around each other. They're not having it with each other because it's all coming out in the media. Rishi Sunak in the UK saying, "Yeah, have all the fighter jets you want, Zelensky," and then Ben Wallace in the
we don't have any.
He says we don't have any, and so that's happening, but I've been hearing, and I think that this is true, like Ukraine is not going to be able to operate fighter jets, even if they were to get there to be flown. So that means, do you think this is what this means? That there's going to be NATO, pilots flying these jets? And if so, that's World War. What do you think about that? Because that would be World War III. We know that this because of what the collective West is doing, the U.S. and its allies, what they're doing, they're moving it in that direction. They've been doing that since the beginning. What's your take on you said a bit about the weapons and how they're so ineffective and likely not going to be used, but overall, now that they're talking about, more and more heavier and heavier, more and more dangerous weaponry, it feels like it's like they want it to become an out and out confrontation, even while they're talking out the side of their mouth that they don't.
Yeah, this first of all, let's understand the following thing. And I can speak to this because even though I'm not a pilot, big hint, glasses. I am a naval aviator. I was trained as what they call a naval aerial observer. I flew in the back seat of OV-10 aircraft, OA-4 aircraft, and these were dual control aircraft. So we learned how to land them. It was important to learn how to land them because the ejection seats were that if, let's say, the pilot got knocked unconscious, I would eject, but because I'm ejecting from the rear, the pilot would not eject. Only if the pilot ejected, we both went out. But if I ejected, the pilot stayed. The pilot's like, "Hey, that means I die. So I'd like to teach you how to land this airplane so you don't eject and kill me." So, I've got a little bit of knowledge about aircraft and flying them, etc. I never flew them in combat, thank goodness, because nobody should ever want to go to combat. But it's not easy to fly an airplane. Yeah, you could remember it's not just taking off. Yeah, you can learn how to take off. It's not just turning left, turning right, climbing, lowering, and then landing. That's just basic stuff. That's airplane 101. Now you've got to learn how to maneuver. You've got to learn important things like, airspeed. As you do a certain maneuver, you're bleeding off your airspeed. You have to be aware of where you are vis-a-vis the other aircraft orientation. You have to be aware of weapon systems, so that when you do a certain maneuver, if you bleed off the airspeed and he has altitude, he can continue and he will come in and he will kill you every single time. You have to be cognizant of this the whole time. And that isn't even something you get in training. That gets from doing it over and over and over and over again till it becomes second nature. And here's the thing. Ukraine has a number of pilots that are quite competent in flying MiGs. Let's not denigrate. We know the Ghost of Kiev was a joke and made up, but there's some pretty good Ukrainian pilots out there. Look, I tell you what, the guys I want to meet are the Ukrainians that flew those hips into Mariupol during the siege to evacuate people. I want to meet those guys and I want to shake their hand, not because I support their cause, but my God, what kind of pilots they are. These guys were flying nap of the earth through Russian air defense, finding the gap, and they were able to get into a city a part under siege, pick people up and leave. Some of them got shot down. Some of them lost their lives, but many of them made it. They evacuated a bunch of people out of there. I want to meet these guys and shake their hands because that's good flying. And if they have helicopter pilots that are that good, I guarantee you they got some other pilots, some MiG pilots or Sukhoi pilots that are pretty good too. But here's the deal. They're good because they've been flying a specific airframe and they know these avionics. It's second nature. Anytime you get into combat training, there's a reason why you repeat everything. And other people are like, this is boring. No, do it over again. Why? Muscle memory. You see, when you get trained, half the time you had a good night's sleep and all this stuff. The best way to train people is when they're exhausted and you're blowing things up in their ears and you're punching them in the face continuously. You can't do that anymore. But the idea is to stress them so it's muscle memory, so that when you go to combat and the world blows up to hell, you're able to function because you're not thinking, you're doing. Muscle memory. And that's the same thing for pilots. You're up in the air and suddenly things are happening and it's muscle memory, baby. You're doing what you've been trained to do based upon the avionics that you're prepared to do, the weapon systems and everything. And so you got guys that are good with MiGs. The South Carolina Air National Guard has a 6-month program that they've been doing for the last couple decades now to transition former Warsaw Pact nations like Bulgaria, Romania, the Czech Republic, etc., Poles, who have transitioned from MiGs to F-16s. So they bring these pilots, and for 6 months they go through an advanced transition program. So at the end of the pipeline, they come out and they can fly the F-16. But the Air Force instructors there say they're not very good at the F-16 because when we stress them, they go back to MiG. They go back to MiG, and the MiG ain't the F-16. And so they'll make a mistake, they'll bleed off airspeed wrong, and they're dead. They said the best pilots are the ones that never had any MiG training. Their brains are clean. So we transition them, and so the muscle memory they're getting is F-16. If you give F-16s to Ukrainian pilots, they're all going to get shot down, 100% guarantee. They're alive today because they know how to fly the MiG. They know how to fly the Sukhoi. They know the airframe. They're able to do really, really skillful stuff. The fact that these guys are still flying this long into a war where Russia has so much superiority tells you these are good pilots. Some of the best in the world probably at what they do. Again, those helicopter pilots, I want to meet them because, my God, I just want to shake the hand of a pilot that can pull that off. That's good stuff. And I'm sure there's a couple of these Ukrainian pilots that I'd like to meet. Now, again, I don't support their cause, but I have to respect skill when you see it. And these guys are good, but they can't fly the F-16. They cannot fly the F-16. So now we come to the crux of the issue. During the Korean War, when the Russians or the North Koreans started flying the MiG-15 aircraft, and we didn't have our, we didn't have to bring in the F-86 Super Sabre. But now, so you have two relatively similar airframes going up against each other, and the North Koreans were getting shot down and the Chinese were getting shot down. So they stiffened them up by bringing in Soviet pilots, and the Soviet pilots were in there flying combat missions, and they're pretty good because that's their airframe. They know it. So the reason why I bring that up is we live in a world where, how do I say this without being sexist? We used to call it big boy pants. Put on your big boy pants. But we're in a world now where men and women are equal. So let's just say put on your big person pants or skirt, whatever you want to call it. Your adult clothes. Well, why don't we say that? Put on your adult clothes. Be an adult. And so it's not World War III if a Polish pilot gets sheep dipped or a Czech pilot gets sheep dipped or that's just called the real world. And the Russians, they're adults. They're not going to be happy about this. But I invariably think that if the F-16 is introduced, there will be a certain percentage of former NATO pilots flying these airframes for the Ukrainians, because that's the only way it would be viable. Now, let me also tell you, they will all get shot down. Want to know why? Because they need to communicate with AWACS airplanes. Now, there will be an AWACS, that's an airborne warning and control system airplane, the E-3 Sentry with the big old spinning disc on top. You might have seen it, and it'll fly near the battlefield. It projects its radar out. It detects anything taking off, moving around, and then it provides the situational awareness to the F-16s to vector them towards a threat or away from a threat. So the F-16 has to operate in that environment. If the AWACS gets in the business of directing these aircraft, that AWACS is a target and will be shot down. So it won't be. So now these planes are going to have to operate on their own. And now you see the F-16 is part of a system, a systemic process of projecting air power. Remove the AWACS, remove the intelligence, and now you just have two pilots flying, wingmen, Maverick and Goose. Goose was his backseater. No, Maverick and Iceman. Yeah, so they're off doing their Maverick Iceman thing. But without the AWACS, the Russians are going to get vectored in and shoot them down every single time. Plus, Nobody's flown against the kind of integrated air defense that the Russians have to bear. The Ukrainians have. This is why they don't have too many pilots left, because they're all dead or shot down. The ones who are alive know how to go very low and fly very limited missions and get in, get out. But if you want to actually turn this into something that's going to have an impact on the battlefield, that means that you're going to have to project and try and sweep Russian air power out. And then you have to do suppression of enemy air defense, come in and bomb the Russian air defenses to open up a gap where the F-16s can come in and provide close air support to have an impact on the battlefield. None of this is going to happen. None of that's going to happen. So let's stop talking fiction. The F-16 will have zero impact on the battlefield. Zero. In fact, it will make the Ukrainians even weaker, because right now they're able to sortie Su-25s to go out and bomb Russian positions with some of the best pilots in the world who are doing the impossible. If you transition them into F-16s, they will be shot down the second take off. That's just the facts. They have some Su-27s out there. They're still flying. If you transition them to the F-16, they will die. They have some MiG-29s. Transition, they will die. The best thing you could do for the Ukrainians is give them the airframes that they know how to fly. But we're not doing that because we somehow think that we need to up the bat. And Zelensky's half the problem. Zelensky be saying, just give me the MiGs, give me the Sukhois, and we'll take care of it. But instead, he's like, give me the F-16s. No, you don't want F-16s. It's the same thing. Zelensky would be far better off getting T-72s upgraded because his troops know how to maintain it and use it. But instead, he's saying, give me the Leopard 2. It is a coffin. It is a moving coffin. It will get killed because A, there's not enough of them, and B, the Ukrainians don't know how to use them properly. And again, it's like a fighter plane. It's not just about, can I turn the tank on? Can I go forward? Can I go backwards? Can I turn the turret around? Wow. Yes, you can. But again, combat is about muscle memory, muscle memory, muscle memory, muscle. And you have a 3-man crew transition into a 4-man crew because there's no automatic loader. You have another loader. And now the tank commander, boom, shell goes off. He starts to give orders based upon a 3-man crew instruction. The gunner's wondering what's going on. Bam, you're dead because the Russians just took you out. That's going to happen to every single Leopard 2 that's going to go on the battlefield. This is stupid. I don't understand why we think there's going to be these miracle weapons, these wonder weapons. They're not. And I'll just leave you with this one, that this is the most disturbing aspect of this, even more disturbing than the fact that we're slaughtering Ukrainians by giving them these weapons. The Germans are providing Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine. I want everybody to chew on that for a second. Because, look, I'll get a little personal here, because this is personal. And it should be personal for every American who had a relative fight in World War II. I had an uncle, and he went across the Normandy beach about D+4. So the big fighting was over, but there were still bodies bobbing there. There's still things, but they came in, and then he had a relatively easy time in the battle for France, the breakthrough and all that. But they got up to Belgium, and then all hell broke loose, the Battle of the Bulge. And in one day, he lost 250 guys in his company from German artillery, and their bodies are buried in the Luxembourg City Cemetery. And I've been there. I went with him. He broke down. He cried. I mean, this is a stoic man. This is a guy who worked, when the war ended, he went to work for Kellogg's in Kalamazoo, and he made cornflakes, and that was his life. He smoked, and he ended up dying of cancer. But, but you wouldn't have known that he had been to World War II. But he had asked, when he came to visit us in Germany, he said, could you show me these things? And we took him there. When he came to the place where the 88s took out the trucks carrying his men, he fell to his knees, and he just cried like a baby. And then we went to the cemetery, and he couldn't handle it. I mean, deeply emotional. And so you say, well, why did we do that to him? Why did we lose those people that are buried in the cemetery? And the idea should be that they died for a cause, and the cause was to defeat Nazi Germany, which means never again should we allow Nazi Germany to come up. Now, the Germans operate with this never again also. This notion of never again will we allow Germany to manifest itself in a manner that gives rise to the Third Reich and the murder of 6 million Jews. But it's more than 6 million Jews that we're talking about. I know that's legitimately so. People focus on that, as they should. But there were 27 million Russians. There were another 6 to 8 million Poles. I mean, the Germans killed everybody. They were equal opportunity employers when it came to the death machine. And, and the idea was Never again. There was a guy named Henry Morgenthau. He was the Secretary of Treasury in 1944 for Roosevelt, and he came up with the Morgenthau Plan. The Morgenthau Plan said, never again can we allow Germany to bring together the nexus of industrialism, nationalism, and militarism. And that the Germans had already had two shots. World War I, they got once, and then World War II. So we're not going to give them a chance to make World War III. He said, that's it. We're going to dismember Germany. We're going to deindustrialize it. They will never be allowed to do this again. Never again. But instead, we said we need a German industry to help with the Marshall Plan, the rebuilding of Europe, etc. But the idea is that Germany would be constrained in their power, that they wouldn't become a militaristic thing. And the biggest checks and balance came from Germany itself that said, never again, never again, never again. Willy Brandt, people should remember Willy Brandt when he went to Poland in the early 1970s, I think 72, and he visited the Warsaw Ghetto. It had been suppressed by Nazis slaughtering Poles and Jews, and he fell to his knees begging forgiveness, as he should have, as every German should. Germans can never forget what they did. Well, I didn't do it, Scott. I wasn't born. I'm sorry, man. You're a German, and you inherited that. There's that old biblical phrase that the sons don't inherit the sins of the father. Not now, baby. Germany, all you Germans, you inherited the sins of the father. And you must live with those sins and never again allow itself to be manifested in a manner that brings together the nexus of nationalism, industrialism, and militarism. And yet you're sending Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine to kill Russians. You have forgotten the lesson of history. Never again is meaningless. And this is where every American should stand up and say, no, Germany, no, you don't get to do that. You don't get to make that decision. You're not a sovereign nation in this regard. You lost that right when you allowed Adolf Hitler to take over in 1936. You lost that right when you allowed Adolf Hitler to march his armies throughout Europe into the Soviet Union. You don't have the right to send German tanks to Ukraine to kill Russians. Not at all. And yet we just seem to be oblivious to it. If you had a relative who fought and died in World War II, you had better go study the history of that sacrifice and understand that what's happening today is an insult to everybody who served, everybody who sacrificed. American and Soviet alike, 27 million Soviets lost their lives. Now, the Russians remember this, but we have tended to forget it. We tend to poo-poo it. No, man, the Germans don't get a pass on this one. I know that this might be just Scott Ritter's little personal opinion, and that's okay, but I hold it, and I hold it strongly. Germany doesn't get a pass. They don't get to send tanks. There they are, but they shouldn't be able to.
Yeah, and the United States was egging it on. I mean, there was that debate at Ramstein Air Base, with the whole defense contact group, back and forth, and it was the United States that said, Germany, you better do this. You need to do this. You're our ally. Step up. And then Germany put up a pathetic little fight, tried to say, oh, you send your M1 Abrams first, and then maybe we'll get to it. Of course, what ended up happening was they all just agreed to send whatever pitiful amount they decided to throw or pledge, I should say. I know you correct us a lot. Pledged these tanks, but of course we know that there's a lot of mystery about whether these will ever reach the battlefield. But you mentioned Germany a lot, and I definitely want to get to. So for everyone watching, Patreon subscribers can submit questions, YouTube members can submit questions, and Substack members can submit questions. And if you have super chats, you can submit questions there as well. You can find all those links in the description, and we're going to get to some Patreon questions in a minute. But since you brought it up, Germany, I think we got to talk. I need to get your take on the Nord Stream revelation from Mr. Seymour Hersh, of course, the renowned journalist, award-winning, heavily decorated, someone who rarely gets things wrong. But of course, we're talking about a revelation from a source. Of course, we don't know who the source comes from, but we know Seymour Hersh is very well connected. And if anyone read the piece on his Substack, you know that it's a very convincing piece, especially given all that we knew about the Nord Stream pipelines, the destruction of them, all of the basically outright hints, if not admissions, that Biden and Blinken and essentially the entire U.S. foreign policy establishment, Victoria Nuland, we're all giving about Nord Stream 2 and the destruction of the pipelines. What was your reaction to this? Because it's a very significant, I think, development. And when I think about Germany here, I just think about wow, Germany has really bent the knee to the United States. It is absolute. It is eh, throughout this whole conflict. I've thought incredible. Like Germany is actually getting hit some of the hardest economically, politically from this. The costs are huge for Germany, and yet it still walks in lockstep behind on a leash in the heel position with the United States. What was your thoughts about the Nord Stream revelations?
Let me start by just a little truth in advertising here. Cy Hirsch is a quarter of a century. He's been a friend of mine. So I have to say right off the bat that I'm strongly biased in favor of Cy Hirsch. I've personally been investigated by him. I know the rigor that he takes, and for 25 years I've been literally at the front row as he comes up with some of his most amazing scoops, Abu Ghraib, etc. I knew nothing about this article before it was written. Knew nothing. I had a hint that he might be thinking about going to Substack, but so I don't have any insights. I can't sit here and tell you I know Cy's source. I don't know Cy's source. What I can say though is that he got a Pulitzer Prize for a reason, and he got a lot of I think they're Peabody Awards or Polk Awards or something like that. Got a lot of those for a reason. And if Cy writes it, you have to treat it seriously. Look, everybody gets it wrong. I think he got burned on a source with JFK book, and he got burned on a source. If you're a reporter doing the business, you're going to get burned on a source, no matter what you do. Could he have been burned on this source? Maybe, but I doubt it. But here's the thing. Everybody's focused on the sexy stuff. The bombs. Tick, 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 tick. The sonar booty. Beep, 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 beep. Boom, boom, boom. Wow. I mean, this is a Tom Clancy movie, man. You could actually make a movie out of this. This is pretty cool stuff. Divers training.
We may see it. We may see a movie eventually.
We see the movie, maybe Cuba Gooding can come back and play the role of the diver, Danny De Niro, Robert De Niro, 1 step forward, 2 step, I mean, it would be great. It would be just like, oh my God, I want to see this movie. But there's more to this story than that's there. First of all, understand that if Cy's source is true, Biden is a criminal. I'm not just talking about a war criminal. Hell, every American president's been a war criminal. So that's, get in line, Joe. He's a criminal because he violated the Constitution of the United States with intent. Mens rea is a term that I've learned in the legal frame, the intent. He plotted with Victoria Nuland, with Jake Sullivan, with Tony Blinken, with the CIA director. They plotted to specifically craft a mechanism to avoid reporting to Congress, to carry out an act of war. So understand this. Cy Hirsch's article should be used as the basis of an indictment against the President of the United States for impeachment for violating the Constitution of the United States of America. And several other people that I just named should likewise be indicted, arrested, found guilty at trial, because they would be found guilty at trial, and then in prison for a very long time. Now, this will never happen because we never do this in America, which shows you how shallow we are as a nation. But if it didn't jump out, let me say something else. I don't mean to insult people, but please reflect with me for a second. Join me in this moment of self-reflection. If you read that article and the first thing that didn't jump out is that we need to impeach Joe Biden for violating the Constitution, then you don't know the Constitution. And if you're calling yourself an American citizen and you don't know the Constitution, you're not a very good citizen, because that which defines us as a collective is the Constitution. That's the only thing that defines us. That's what unites us. That's what gets a redneck from Texas hanging out with a liberal from New York City. That's what makes us Americans, the Constitution. You take the Constitution away and we're nothing, baby. We are nothing. Nothing. There is no glue. The glue is the Constitution. And if you don't know the Constitution, you're not a very good American. So if you read it and you didn't go impeach right now, you got a problem. But then there's something else that you got that jumps out at you. We attacked our friend, Germany. It's an act of war. We carried out an economic Pearl Harbor against a nation that we claim to be friends and allies with. And we colluded with another NATO ally to do this. And even though Norway was the trigger puller with us, it's like any crime. If you're driving the getaway car and the murder takes place in the bank, you're a murderer. And there's a lot of murderers out there. Germany, wake up. Nobody likes you. Everybody's conspiring against you. And America attacked you, and you're doing nothing about it. Now, there's a term, and I won't use it out of respect for you, but it begins with a C. And it ends with old, and you can fill in the gaps. And that's what Germany has become, because they're allowing this to happen and they're not doing anything about it. Olaf Scholz knows darn well who attacked Nord Stream. Everybody in Germany knows darn well, and yet they're like the abused spouse, just going, no, I fell down. The bruise, no, he didn't hit me. He didn't hit me. No, Germany is the abused spouse, and America is the abuser, and everybody's pretending that nothing happened. We're just turning a blind eye. Guys, we attacked a nation we claim to be friends. Now, I know, I just told you that we're not friends with anybody, and just take a look at the Ukraine, the proof. But Germany, we attacked them. It's an act of war. And now comes the really interesting part. April 1st was we could have ended the war. This war could have ended on April 1st. Ukraine was ready to sign a peace agreement with Russia. It could have come to an end. All the angst and anxiety that we have today would be gone. We'd actually hopefully be not only repairing relations with Russia, but we could actually be engaged in serious arms control discussions with Russia about START and getting another START treaty in play. The current one expires in 2026. There is no automatic extension anymore. We already did that one, which means when it expires, it's gone. And when you lose this one, that means both arsenals are going to be expanding up at a time when there's high tension. And that is a recipe for disaster. One mistake, one miscalculation, one misunderstanding, bam, and the world ends. And when I say end, guys, I mean goodbye. Lights out. You're never going to wake up because it's all over. We seem to be oblivious to that. Oh, nuclear war. Well, no, it ain't theoretical, dudes. It's real. The weapons are out there. They're ready to be used right now. Right now, they're ready to be used. The only thing holding them back is arms control, and that arms control is about to go away. So wouldn't it be nice to be engaged with them? And we could have been had there been a peace treaty on April 1st. But now we come back to old Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe. Sleepy Joe stood there on February 7th of last year, and he said, if the Russians invade Ukraine, tanks across the border, Nord Stream 2 will be no more. And a reporter actually said, what do you mean? That's Germany. It'll be no more. It sounds like a confession to me after the fact. I mean, he basically confessed it. Victoria Nuland said the same thing. But Russian tanks went across on February 24th. On April 1st, Nord Stream 2 was still in play. And had there been a peace treaty, Nord Stream 2 would have stayed in play. Nord Stream 1 would have continued to pump billions of cubic meters of gas into Germany. And then Germany's economy would still be dependent upon Russia, Russian gas and European economy, et cetera, which means that everybody's paying low prices, their industries are working, et cetera. We sabotaged that peace treaty. Why? Because we wanted to blow up Nord Stream. And if you read Cy's article, you'll see that after April 1st, we started moving things in motion. That's when we got serious, because we realized that this conflict could come to an end. We have to blow up these things. And therefore, we held the exercise, Baltops 22 in June. And bam, September, we blow it up. That's what this is all about. And I hope everybody understands what I'm saying here, that this war was never about, it may be about Ukraine, but it's turned into something different. It's about America creating the conditions for American hegemony, economic-based hegemony, that isn't just about strangling Russia through sanctions and bleeding them dry and white in the war. It's about bringing down the European Union, bringing down the Eurozone, bringing down Germany. We blew up the Nord Stream pipeline in order to send a signal to Germany, France, and all of Europe that we're in charge. We're taking over. And what have we done? We've replaced cheap Russian gas with expensive American liquid natural gas. We've destroyed their economies. And yet Europe just sits there and goes, more, more, boss, more, give me more. I mean, this is disturbing. So this is why Cy Hirsch's article is genius, because he has basically put the pieces in place that allow all of these things to become crystal clear. Just, you know, I in the intelligence business, I had a good reputation for doing a couple things. One is identifying dots, because in the intelligence business, it's like getting one of those 1,000 piece puzzles, and they shake it up and they throw it on the table, and then they take their arm and they take 80% of them off the table, and you got 20% left, and they said, "Tell me what it is." And you're going, "Well, I only got 20% of the pieces," but you got to put it together, connect the dots, and then you come up with an idea of what it is. That's what intelligence is. And sometimes you get good and you can uncover a couple more pieces and bring it in, but you never have 100% of the pieces. I was good at identifying the dots and connecting the dots. What Hirsch's article did is identify the dots, and now it's up to us to connect them. And it's quite obvious. I mean, he literally has giant signs that say, "This dot goes here, this dot goes here." And I just hope that people appreciate this man. He's 85 years old, and I hope this man lives forever. But he is a national treasure, and right now he has done America and the world a great service, a great service. And we don't deserve him, but we got him. So let's do something honorable by him.
Mm. Yeah, indeed. I mean, you said it. The precedent that this has set, just the situation when it comes. I mean, Germany, the cost. It still baffles me. I see the clip all the time. Joe Biden and Olaf Scholz, February 7th, 2022. It was so obvious that there was something going on here. How could you not know that Nord Stream was already being targeted by sanction? There was sanctions talk.
Yeah.
Stop, bring it down. Don't allow Nord Stream 2 to run. The Americans wagging their finger. Germany, you've got to wean off of Russian gas. Already back then, this is before Russia's special military operation. And then it happens, and Germany whistling past the graveyard, and look at who's benefited. The United States and Norway. Norway has benefited mightily from this too. They have their own pipeline that has that I think was launched. I don't
Launched
know,
the day after.
the day after, and now is pumping its own LNG and
Into
doing
Poland,
quite
and
well.
then Poland's reselling it to Germany at a profit.
Yep.
Once again, the Germans just get it on all ends. I mean,
And then you see the IMF forecast for Germany, very gloomy. And who
Yeah.
knows if that will even hold in terms of, they're going the opposite direction. Unlike when you see like China, for example, they up the growth. With Germany, unclear if they'll make it to even zero growth this year. So it's absolutely incredible. And you're right. The precedent is just, I don't know if you have any final comments on this, but the precedent is I think just so in your face in terms of the situation that Germany and Europe has found itself in and has gotten itself into, playing poodle, playing, dog wag the tail with the United States.
No, I mean, I think you wrapped it. All I'd be doing is repeating what we've already talked about. I mean, this is literally Germany is pathetic. Europe is pathetic. And it's tragic because we're supposed to be their friends. I mean, the biggest pathetic thing about here is America, because we have a government that, everything we touch dies. Think about it. Everything we touch dies. We're poison. We're poison for the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think it's a good time. Now we can get to, there's a few Patreon member questions. So if everyone watching, make sure you're hitting that like button as well as you're watching. That helps boost the algorithm, and YouTube doesn't like to push videos like this out there. So drop a like. But also you can suggest guests and also ask question of guests if you become a member on YouTube. You can join on Patreon. That's the best place, in the link in the description. And I have a few Patreon members who had a couple of questions. Let's get to the more, I guess, direct related question to this conflict. So I spoke about this on a past stream, and there's been these kind of grumblings toward peace. And a good friend, actually, D Knight, a good anti-war activist out here in New York, he had a question for you, Scott. He wants to know, what did you make of so Blinken's interview in Washington Post? It was kind of like it was almost like a type out of it was like a paraphrasing of an interview that David Ignatius did. He's you probably know him well, Scott. He is a stenographer of war. He's very much close to all of these neocons, and he was essentially regurgitating Blinken's words, and it was all about the pondering the post-Ukraine war order. And D Knight wants to know, there was some quote unquote concessions that Blinken mentioned, especially with relation to Crimea. What do you make of this? He sees it as maybe a trial balloon for both Russia and the American public, but what do you make of these so-called concessions that Blinken, and there's been some others floating these around to Russia? What's your take on this?
Well, again, I start off by acknowledging that I, like almost everybody else, was confused when this war started. We had certain assumptions that were wrong, etc. I think it would be wrong for me or anybody to have certain assumptions. For instance, that my analytical trend is that Russia is done with negotiations. Russia's done with concessions. FAFO, and we're in the FO part of that equation. But that's just me. My bias is that of a Marine, and I'm all about the FO. So Russia, I was surprised when I finally took a step back and reevaluated that first month and a half of the war. I was surprised about how committed Russia was to a negotiated settlement. That surprised me. And therefore, I need to respect that conclusion and understand that Russia might still be looking for a negotiated settlement, but it's not going to be a negotiated settlement on Ukraine's terms. It'll be a negotiated settlement on terms that allow Russia and the collective West to stabilize and get on the path of repairing their relations. But Ukraine's concerns, I mean, this is where Blinken has a problem, because he's floating trial balloons that have to be grounded in what Ukraine will accept. Russia doesn't care what Ukraine's going to accept. And I personally believe that the only negotiation that's going to take place is going to be similar to what took place in Tokyo Bay in September of 1945, when the Japanese came on the USS Missouri and were told, sign here or die. And I personally believe that at some point in time, the Russians are going to have a Ukrainian delegation come in and say, sign here or die. But that's an extreme interpretation. The reality is that the Russians are probably looking for an off-ramp, because they're not happy about what's happening to Ukraine. This breaks their heart. They didn't want to do this. They were given no choice. But you also have to understand that now the Russian population, now Putin, remember what I talked about earlier about the sanctions and the mobilization, how you could get the Russian population turned against you back then? The Russian population has flipped the script. They are now, let's finish this job. Denazification, demilitarization. They're all on board. And the Russian government has to respect that too. So the Russian government can't come in and accept terms that might bring it into this conflict early, but would be unacceptable to the population that says we've lost too many men right now for a negotiated outcome. I think Blinken is throwing things out there, but the Russians aren't in receive mode right now. I think Blinken might be throwing things out there for the West and Ukraine to begin to come to agree. But the battlefield is going to dictate the conditions. Right now, Zelensky, the offensive, the surge is just starting. So right now, Zelensky's the shell collector on the beach who ran out there when the waves went away and he started collecting the shells. He's looking up going, ooh, water's coming back. It's lapping at my feet. But he still thinks that that's it, that he can still go out and get that last shell, those F-16s and those tanks, and we're gonna be a nice little shell collection we're gonna have. He doesn't realize that the surge is coming and it's going to sweep him away and everybody else away. And Blinken, I think, doesn't realize that too. You know who does realize it? The Pentagon. They know what's about to happen. They see it happening, and they're going, nah, there ain't going to be nothing left of this beach. Everybody on the beach is going to die, because that water is just going to come in and go all the way inland, sweep everything away, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it's just it has been interesting to watch this division play out, even publicly, while not out and out bickering with each other, but seeing how the Department of State, seeing how people like Newland and Blinken say one thing, and then the Pentagon and even the Joint Chiefs of Staff have been saying something a little different. And you had the Rand Corporation. I don't know if you saw that study, or I don't even call it a study. It was really a statement. It was really just, here is the situation. A long war is really bad for the United States.
But you have to start in 2019. The Rand Corporation wrote the study that said strip Ukraine away, bring Russia down, and all that.
Yep.
And they committed to that. And now you got these guys going. And remember, they can't walk away from that because that means that they're stupid. They can't turn 180 degrees away from that. So they're basically saying everything we wrote there was sort of okay. Yes, 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 yes. But it would be in our best interest not to have a long war, and we need to get out. But the problem is all their supporting analysis doesn't reach that conclusion. If we're going to take that conclusion, we have to reverse engineer the analysis. And what they're saying is we were wrong about everything. We were wrong about everything, and we're not going to win this war, and we need to get out now. So yeah, Rand, they've got problems too.
Well, before we get to the Rage Against the War Machine rally, maybe we can keep talk. I just want to hear your take on then, if this is the case that the United States and NATO, let's just say the United States, since the United States is really driving the ship. And given Seymour Hersh's article, we saw that really there's a very small crew maybe at the head of this ship. Given that they're making it quite clear that on the one hand, they can't get off on an exit ramp. They feel like whatever it is, whether they feel like they're weak, whether they would look weak, it's bad politically, the objective overall, right? Get Russia. Pulling back is a impediment to that. But at the same time, there's this ever-growing reality on the ground that shows there really isn't much else that can be done other than more war or pull back. It feels like that contradiction is becoming incredibly sharp. Where do you, if I know this is all about kind of like guessing at this point, given things are so dynamic, but how do you see this playing out? That problem, I mean, the United States is facing a problem, as much as I think people kind of look from the outside and think, oh, well, the United States is steering the ship pretty steadily. Where do you think this is going?
It's my crystal ball. I'm going to look into it. But look, here's the reality that's coming in. NATO is a paper tiger. And I've been saying this for some time, and people have taken umbrage at that. I mean, they've gotten really mad at me about that.
Yeah, I bet.
But
I say it all the time too, but yeah.
But I just wait, and I'm like, okay, but we'll just let the facts play out. Right now, the British Army can't do anything. Literally can't. I mean, we talked about it earlier about Ben Wallace, about the Air Force. Let's give them airplanes. In Sunak's like, yeah, give them airplanes. And Wallace like, we don't have any airplanes to give. We got nothing. But who else doesn't have any airplanes to give? Germany. All their airplanes are broken. They can't get any of their airplanes off the ground. I mean, they can get some, but most of them are just hangar queens because they've not been maintaining them. France is the same way. We're the same way. Everybody's the same way. Let's say we go to war and we're going to bring the great NATO out air power. It ain't that great, guys. Really, just take a look at operational, rates. What percentage of aircraft we can actually take off. And then once you take them off, as you crank into maintenance hours because they break, how quickly they're going to draw down to nothing, where we literally can't get anything off the ground. But let's say they do take off. How many air-to-air missiles do we have in Europe right now ready to go to war? And the answer is not enough. That's a classified number. I mean, I could speculate, but I don't want to get in trouble. But the answer is not enough. We don't have enough of anything. And now Stoltenberg has just come out and admitted the truth that I've been saying all along. They don't have any artillery ammunition. The Ukrainians are burning up artillery ammunition. And remember, the Ukrainians are operating at about a 6-to-1, 10-to-1 deficit. So every artillery piece the Ukrainians have that goes boom, the Russians either have 6 or 10 going boom, 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 boom in return. And the The Russians are never running out of ammunition. They never will run out of ammunition. Ukraine is running out of ammunition, and nobody has ammunition to give them. And Stoltenberg just said that. We got nothing. The British would run out of ammunition in a large-scale ground combat like this in how many days? There's the answer, 2 days. Great Britain runs out of ammo. And let me give you a pro tip, people. When you run out of ammo, you die. It's over. Okay, Rambo just doesn't work. Rambo without ammunition is a dead body, just a big body going in a body bag. That's it. Rambo doesn't exist. Ammunition exists, and we don't have any ammo. We don't have anything, nothing. And that's just a set. And finally, the U.S. commander in Europe is saying, yeah, we're not ready for this kind of war. At least finally, see, the Pentagon's starting to wake up. Because everybody's like, well, we're gonna push the Russians. He's like, no, let's just stop pushing the Russians right now, because you see, what people don't understand, it's not just that Putin mobilized 300,000 reservists in September. Late last year, he authorized the expansion of the Russian military to 1.5 million people. That means it's going to be a massive expansion of the Russian military. Most of them are going, it's not going to be a conscript expansion. There will be some conscripts, but most of them are going to be contract soldiers, professionals. They're expanding the airborne and the Marines. Why? Those are expeditionary forces. So now they have forces that can respond to crises around the world. Lots of more artillery. Imagine that. The Russians even getting more artillery. And their defense industry is gearing up and just cranking stuff out right now. Let's say, hypothetically, I wanted to build more AMRAAM missiles, one of our advanced missiles for the fighter planes. I can't just call up Raytheon and say, crank them out, baby. Because Raytheon's going to say, with what money, baby? And they go, oh, well, we got to go to Congress. Okay, emergency defense appropriation. Okay, but now you have money, and we tell crank out. But the one line that they have cranking this stuff out now can only do, X number a month. I don't know what it is, but it's not going to be a lot, which means they have to build another production line. But you can't just build another production line. That requires more funding. And then you got to do things like hire people that are qualified for the job, train them. Years go down the road before you can do that. We're not even there yet. The Russians are already doing this. So, we have created a situation where we've dug ourselves in the deepest hole possible, literally the deepest hole possible. There's no way out of this. There is no military solution, and anybody seeking to promote a military solution is encouraging then the end of the world, because the only military thing that we have that can go toe-to-toe with the Russians is nuclear. And once we do that, like I said, it's not a joke. Anybody who's out there thinking, no big deal, we can do a limited nuclear attack. There's no such thing as a limited nuclear attack. Any use of nuclear weapons means the world will end instantaneously.
Yeah. I mean, as you were talking, I kept on thinking about these times, even during COVID, where the United States would invoke the Defense Production Act. And every time I think about that, I'm like, oh, but in this situation where we're talking about the United States trying to wage a war with Russia, you think, well, then you're going to have to produce a lot of ammunition, a lot of weapons. And then you're going to have to do something. That's a lot of labor. And also, as you said, years down the line can go by before you can build the facilities that you need, get everything that you need to make sure that what you need to produce is actually produced. And so Ukraine doesn't have that time. It seems like doesn't have all of that time to wait around.
We don't have that time.
Yeah. So, okay, well, let's get to the second and final Patreon member question from AJ. And this person wanted to know about your thoughts. I know that, you've written on Substack about this. The Rage Against the War Machine rally is happening February 19th. I'll give my take later because a lot of people have been asking me as well after you, but you are my guest, so let's be polite. And this person wants to know if you could comment on the progressives distancing themselves. There's been a lot of kind of like speakers who are invited to speak, then they've withdrawn their participation. What is your opinion on all that's transpired with the Rage Against the War Machine rally happening February 19th, I believe, in DC?
Well, let me just start off by pointing out that this isn't my first rodeo. I cut my teeth on the anti-war movement opposing the Iraq War. And I think I have a pretty extensive resume that I'll put up against any anti-war activist anywhere in the world, and I'll kick your ass. Excuse my language. But anybody out there to say that I don't have the anti-war credentials, I got more street cred in the anti-war business than anybody out there, bar none. So I don't want to hear it from people. And I have been jaded by the Iraq experience. Jaded. I don't believe that America has a viable anti-war movement. We have a lot of viable anti-war activists. Danny, you're one of them. I mean, I respect you. I like your positions. I like the positions of a lot of people. I don't put politics in here. I mean, let me put it this way. When a bullet hits you in the head, it doesn't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. It's just going to splatter your brains. So anybody who tries to bring politics into the anti-war movement, you're doing just get the hell out of my way, because you're ruining it from the start. The second you politicize the anti-war movement, it's all over. Because it's no longer the anti-war movement. It means that a political party or political movement is using the anti-war cause to further their political ambitions. So it's not about anti-war. So I distance myself. I do things. I mean, for instance, I live in the town of Bethlehem, New York, and there's a great organization, Bethlehem Neighbors for Peace. And I do things with them because A, I like the guys that run it. B, it's my neighborhood. But C, I'm going to be frank, ain't nothing going to happen from it. From my perspective, I know they're going to say, we're trying, Scott, and I know you're trying, but I just don't like spinning my wheels. I'm not a hamster. I just don't like to spin and run and run and run and run. It's not what turns me on. So, so I gave a speech in New York City, a book, a book thing on January 15th. Interesting backstory. I won't waste time on that, but I did this. And I have to say, it was one of the best speeches I've ever given. I mean, I've done a lot of public speaking, and halfway through this one, I'm going, whoa, I'm actually saying some pretty cool stuff. And you can see the audience and see the reaction. You're like, yeah, I'm firing on all cylinders here. I'm hitting the buttons, boom, boom, boom. And it was a good speech. And I was approached by a gentleman. Yeah, I don't want to name names here, but he's an organizer of the event. And he said, would you come and speak at the February 19th event? And I said, no, I don't want to. He said, why not? I said, because I don't believe in what, I mean, I believe in the cause, but I just don't want to get involved in that again. I've been burned. I mean, my hand has hit the burner and it went ouch. And so when it's glowing red, I don't want to put my hand back on it because I just know what's going to happen. I'm going to go ouch. And he was like, no, man, we drove up from Washington, D.C. to see you. This presentation you just gave, you've got to give that to this. This is what everybody needs to hear. And I said, no. And he kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And because I'm a softie, I said, yes. And I said, okay, I'll do it. I'll go speak. And so they put my name on a poster and they publicized it. And immediately, bam, there was, people say, nope, we don't want him up there. And we're going to pull him from the program. And the main reason they cited was my criminal conviction. And, and I get it. I mean, if that's your thing, if you don't want to do the research, if you don't want to actually dig into it, I mean, you're going to accuse me of something. Why don't you dig into it and find out everything you accuse me of never happened? But that's okay. That's your life. And if you don't want me to speak, I go back to my original thing. I don't want to be there. So I was like, okay, I mean, you shouldn't have asked me to begin with, but I'm done. Now you put my name on a poster, it's cancel culture. Congratulations. You've just made it more easy for people to cancel me now. But that's okay. I'm a big boy. I'll get on with it. But then all the speakers basically said, nah, if he goes, we go. There won't be an event. And so the people who were anti me flipped the script and said, no, we want you back on. And I said, really? Are you serious this time? They said, yes, we want you back on. I said, okay, I'll do it. So they put me back on. And then they did the whole thing again. And now I'm confronted. And look, I'm going to be very frank here. I've been called a twice convicted pedophile more times than I care to be called a twice convicted pedophile. I've never been convicted twice of anything, and I damn sure am not a pedophile. And if you say it to my face, I will rip your throat out. That's an open challenge to anybody. All you keyboard heroes out there, say it to my face, because it ain't true. And if you took the time to look at it, you know it's true. And they built it up. The entire Libertarian Party has, tweet after tweet after tweet after tweet calling me a pedophile, pedophile, pedophile. And there's not a term that's more damaging to a person than that. You could call me a murderer and I would be welcomed by the community. Scott Ritter's a murderer. That's okay. He just killed somebody. He's a pedophile. It ain't true, but use that word. Oh, we are going to run away. So I basically said, I'm done with this game. And I built together a legal case because in New York State, libel laws are pretty good. Defamation, I got to prove 5 things. And I had them all proven in spades, and I'm going to destroy the Libertarian Party. And I'm ready to do it. You want to go to war against Scott Ritter? Let's go to war. But the last thing, the 5th thing, is damage. I have to demonstrate damage. And believe me, having them pull me from the speakers thing, I can get a lawyer that can put dollar figures to that, and it's damaging. Reputation, the whole thing. So we owned them. I owned the Libertarian Party. Hey, Libertarian Party, I owned you. I was going to ruin you. But then people came up to me and said, Scott, this rally is important. It doesn't matter if you don't believe in the rally. We believe in the rally. We believe that we have something going here. We believe that we can bring these voices together. And we understand where you're coming from. I don't think they do, unless you've been called a twice convicted pedophile when it's not true, and you carry that burden, and people, you don't have no clue what's going on. But that's okay. I respect you. If I went forward with the lawsuit, it would have been the end of the rally. I had every legal right to go forward with the lawsuit. I have every moral right to go with the lawsuit. And I'm telling you right now, if you guys were in my shoes, you would have gone forward with the lawsuit too, especially when you put up with this crap, for, excuse my language, with this stuff for as long as I have. But I'm also somebody who understands that there's people out there who believe in something and they want to go through. And if I had gone through, no matter how right I was, I would always be the guy who destroyed the rally. I would always be the guy that took the rally down. Nobody would pay attention to the righteousness of my legal action. They would just say, you were petty. You allowed your personal life to destroy what could have been the beginning of a new peace movement. So I shut it down. I backed out gracefully. And I'm not unhappy with the decision. To be honest, I'm actually very relieved with the decision, because the last thing I really wanted to do is get involved in another court case and, and just the whole drama about that. I am out of the rally, and I'm okay with that. And I honestly want this rally to succeed. Do I believe it's going to succeed? No, I don't. I don't believe it at all. I don't believe in the Libertarian Party. I don't believe they're serious people. I think they're going to betray the left. They're going to betray the movement. I think they have politicized this thing, but that's just my opinion. I think the rally should be given a chance. I want people to go to the rally. I want them to listen to the speakers. And I hope that the message that the speakers put out there resonate, so that left and right can come together and we can create a new anti-war movement that can move this nation in a great direction. I hope that happens. I sincerely do hope that happens. I'm not going to be a part of it. I didn't want to be a part of it, but then when they invited me, I was prepared to be a part of it. I actually wrote a speech that I was prepared to give. And I, and instead of, doing a, point by point, he said, she said on how we got to me being pulled out at the end, I just said, screw it. Excuse me, again, I apologize for my language. The heck with it. Here's my speech. This is what I wanted to deliver, and take it as it is. That's where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, appreciate your 100% honest, unfiltered take on this, because I mean, yeah, lawsuit, that is stressful stuff for sure. But what you're saying definitely resonated in a lot of ways, because people have been asking me my position on it, and I have a very similar position. Like, I am not here to bring down the rally. I'm not going to say, don't go to the rally, don't go. I would never do that to people who are genuinely looking to engage in anti-war politics and positions. I would never do that. Now, when I saw that it was being organized by the Libertarian Party, yes, I am familiar with the Libertarian Party. I have met many libertarians. I traveled to China with more than a few Libertarian Party members. Very weird experience, but I did it, and it was very strange. But at the same time, it was very revealing. And I'm younger than you, Scott, but I've been in the anti-war movement for 10 years. And I can say that, yeah, I'm not surprised that there have been so many problems before the rally even happened. I'm not surprised by that because we live in a country where there are a lot of disagreements between various forces, many of whom happen to be really small. I'm on the left. The left is really small. The actual left, not the Democratic Party left, but the anti-war left, very small at this time. A little bigger during the Iraq War period, but as you probably found out, Scott, I was too young at the time to really engage, but I know a lot of people who engage in it. You end up finding out there weren't actually that many left people out there. They were ready to fall in line with the Democrats when the first opportunity arose. But for you know, for me, I was never, for me, I'm not going to say, oh, because the libertarians are organizing it, don't go. And I wasn't going to disparage it, but at the same time, I'm not going to endorse it on my channel. I'll say, go check it out, please do. But also, I have noticed that, you know, a lot of people that I know who have been organizing for a long time, not invited, not asked to speak, not asked to go. And you could say, well, not everyone has to be invited. But at the same time, there have been people who, while the anti-war left has been so small, very weak in organizational strength, but at the same time, they've been doing really hard work. You mentioned your experience out where you are, out here in New York City, and all across the country, there are people who are doing really hard work, and a lot of them weren't invited. So as you said, there is a politicization of this. Unfortunately, in the United States, we often end up with this kind of politicization because the left, the entire political spectrum has been so infected by Cold War divisions, by all sorts of sectarianism. And then you get into just the fact that grassroots forces on the anti-war left are much smaller and without resources than those who do have resources. So no, I don't disparage this. I support people who are going. I have friends who are speaking. Garland Nixon's a friend. There are many. Chris Hedges' friend. These are friends. These are people, good people. There are a lot of good people. See, Jimmy Dore, friend. All friends. I do not disparage them for speaking. I don't disparage the rally itself. But at the same time, everything that's happened and transpired with you, Scott, and everything that's happened around it, those are things we have to deal with and we have to talk about. Doesn't mean we do it in the way that maybe some forces did it. I don't agree with saying, like, I know your situation is in particular, but there are some forces who endorsed it organizationally and then said no when they found out Scott Ritter was speaking or they found out somebody said something. No, do your research, do your homework first.
Due diligence, baby.
Do your due diligence. Don't do that. That makes everybody look bad. That makes anyone who's anti-war look bad. It doesn't even matter where you're on the political spectrum. You don't want to do that. You don't want to do the work of forces that are already powerful enough to undermine you already. You don't want to do that. So for me, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with endorsing than unendorsing just because you found out some things you didn't like. You got to make sure you know what you're getting into. And so for me, people go check it out. You know, it's good to come together around anti-war causes, but at the same time, have your eyes wide open. Be ready to engage with the difficulties and challenges that is any kind of activism, but especially anti-war activism when you live in this belly of the beast, when you live in this, as you said, the like the heart of the evil that is happening in this world, especially when it comes to war.
I don't even. One of the problems I have, and I mentioned it to the gentleman who approached me, is what is the definition of anti-war? I mean, you know, you're going to have an anti-war rally, but you're bringing together people who have differing positions on how to define that term. And then after the fact, you find out that there's a litmus test, apparently. I don't know exactly what, but apparently there's a libertarian litmus test that if you don't meet the libertarian definition of anti-war, you can't be. And I don't meet the libertarian definition of anti-war, apparently. And again, I'll just say this to the Libertarian Party. You can bring Scott Horton, you can bring anybody you want up against me, and I'll put my anti-war resume on the table, and they, you know, it won't even compare. So to pretend that I'm not anti-war, that because I don't meet your litmus test, that's the death knell of this rally, because you're trying to bring together different people who have different ideas. And the idea is to have all the ideas out there. And I think it's a good idea to have an audience listen to as wide a range of options as possible to imbue themselves with the spirit of moving forward to oppose the military industrial complex. Yay. But if before they even get up there, you have them going, he's not really anti-war enough. He's not anti-war enough. And who are you to make that decision? Somebody from the Libertarian Party? I'm sorry, that's just not good enough. I'll tell you what, if I'm not a big fan of litmus tests, but I'll respect the litmus test of a Medea Benjamin more than I will of a Scott Horton. That's just straight up. And I like Medea. Medea and I have had uncomfortable moments on the stage together because she is literally a peace activist, and I am not a peace activist. And we were trying to work together successfully. By the way, we had a good meeting, but it was if anybody ever found that videotape of Medea and I on the stage in Santa Cruz, watch it because it is hilarious to look at the human interaction between the two of us. I dig Medea and I like Code Pink, and there's a lot of people on the left that I have the highest respect for because they have the sweat equity. They've done it. They've been out there. They've been doing this task, not successfully, but at least they gave it the try. I don't have the same level of respect for the Libertarian Party. They've never been serious about anti-war. I feel that they use the anti-war movement as a cause to promote their narrow vision of politics. And my thing, again, because I'm not we've talked about it, I don't need to reiterate it, but I believe that there are times when you have to go to war. You have no choice. And if you're going to go to war, you better win. Don't go to war and lose, which means you need people like me who are trained to do things that nobody wants to talk about. But the ultimate manifestation of that is nuclear conflict. And here's where I come from. I may not pass your litmus test when it comes to the Ukrainian-Russian war. That's okay. It's a controversial war. I get it. But I'm against nuclear conflict. I'm for arms control. I'm for getting rid of nuclear weapons. And I don't care what your political party is. If you're not for that, then you are the problem. And so, my whole thing was to try and use this rally to communicate the need to drop political pretense and focus on saving humanity. By coming together regardless. I don't care what color you are. I don't care what your political party is. I don't care what your sexual orientation is. I don't care what your criminal record is. I don't care, because when a nuclear bomb goes off, you're all going to die. And that's what should unite us. That is what unites us. We will all die in a nuclear conflict. So to stop it, we all need to come together, not to promote political agendas, but to send a signal, because I thought that was the purpose of the rally, to send a signal to Washington, D.C., that their policies are no longer acceptable, to invigorate the American people so that their will can be expressed at the voting place against those politicians who are operating in a manner that diverges from what they say they want. And I would like to create a movement that come 2024 tells whoever's going to run for the presidency that you ignore arms control at your own risk, that arms control must be on the front burner because that's the only issue that's going to kill everybody. We can have disagreements about healthcare, Social Security, the economy. You can have a lot of disagreements about things. And if you allow yourself to get into that minutia, then you get February 19th. But if we agree on the big picture, that we all die when the nuclear weapons go boom, therefore, why don't we encourage our government to work with other people who possess nuclear weapons to control them and to get rid of them? So that's where I was coming from with this rally. It's still a cause that I believe in, and I'll be working on that with other people, and we'll see what happens. But we'll see what happens on February. Like you, I wish them the best. I hope they succeed. And if they do, I will applaud them.
Can I just ask you, you mentioned the litmus, I'm just curious now, the litmus test of the Libertarian Party. What is their litmus test? I can't speak right now. What is their litmus test for anti-war politics, which is strange because I've been to many anti-war rallies in my life, and I can say that the percentage of times I have seen the Libertarian Party at one has been 0%. So what is their litmus test for being anti-war? How did they relay that to you? I'm just curious.
Well, I mean, they claim that it's pure anti-war. So on the Russian-Ukrainian thing, and here's the interesting part, because they don't even know what they're talking about. They go, you have to be pro-negotiated settlement.
Hmm.
You can't be pro-Russian victory, but they're silent about pro-NATO victory. You see, because in addition to pro-settlement, you must condemn Russia for the unprovoked aggression against Ukraine. So already there's a little bit of a skew there. You're no longer pure. You're defending the Ukraine. But to be pro-negotiation, at what stage do you become pro-negotiation? Minsk? Were you pro-Minsk? I just want to know, libertarians, can you even spell Minsk? Because sometimes Minsk comes with a 1, sometimes Minsk comes with a 2. Do you know the difference between the two, Libertarian Party? And the answer is no, you don't. Do you know that Petro Poroshenko, Angela Merkel, and Francois Hollande said that the Minsk Accords were just a sham? So Russia's legitimate effort to negotiate an end to the Donbass conflict from 2014 to 2022, Russia was the only legitimate player there. Do you recognize that, Libertarian Party, when you speak about the need for negotiated settlement? No, you don't recognize that at all either. Do you understand that Russia sought a negotiated settlement that we've already talked about that would have manifested itself on April 1st? Russia's the only party that was serious about that too. So when the Libertarian Party says they are in favor of a negotiated settlement, they need to understand that you can't make up your own facts. You have to deal with the reality. And the reality is Russia is the only party that has been serious about a negotiated end to this conflict from the very beginning. And yet they want to say Russia is the bad guy and we need to pursue a negotiated on whose terms? You know, and this is where the Libertarian Party falls apart. They claim to be purists, but they're just ignorant. Literally the most ignorant people on the face of the earth about a conflict they claim to be anti-war about. They don't know what they're talking about. These are Johnny-come-latelys. Look, I've had similar discussions with the left. And I get frustrated with the left too. But I will say this, that if I sat down with Medea Benjamin and had this kind of discussion, she would at least come forward with some facts. She would at least come forward and have a basic understanding. Her issues would never be based upon a factual disagreement. It would be based upon interpretation of these facts. And that's okay. That's why we have debate, dialogue, and discussion, because, I have my spin, she has her spin, and the idea is rather than oppose each other, talk it out, reach a compromise, find the middle ground. And Medea and I did that with Iraq. Trust me, we weren't on the same page on everything with Iraq. I fought in the Gulf War. She didn't like that, but we managed to find a way to work it out and come together with a middle ground that we both agreed was right, and we worked together. The Libertarian Party won't do that. They've made this litmus test of purity that they themselves can't meet. They're not intellectually capable of doing this. And yet they want to claim that somehow they hold the high moral ground on this conflict with Russia. No, they don't. They don't hold the high moral ground. They can't even make it to the table. They don't get a seat at the table. You guys don't even get in the door. If we were really going with true anti-war credentials, the Libertarian Party doesn't even get a foot in the door. And yet now they claim that they are the ones to have the litmus test to determine who is pure and who isn't pure. That's just, that's wrong.
Yeah, and the fact that a lot of this has happened, like that's just one of the most unfortunate things I think that has surrounded this rally, is that a lot of these things that you are saying, Scott, should be dialogue and discussed with amongst each other, has happened in public on the internet. That's one of the things that I cannot stand. It's like, I don't know where you have been, where you think that that's going to benefit. Like the fact that I'm even being asked, Danny, you look at all this stuff that's being said, you have to address this. It's like, this rally should not be a controversy. It should be a gathering amongst people who at the very least agree on this issue and can come together, as you said, on points on this monumental conflict that does hold the risk of everyone dying from nuclear war. That's a very real risk. And it should not be about, okay, whose politics are whose politics. And, it should not have gotten to that point. But
No,
there was some due diligence that didn't happen. And of course, there was, I just think, a lot of just human error. And that's unfortunate. And political error, meaning that it was politicized, but also the politics that were being brought to it created a lot of room for error. And so that's something I've seen many times before. Given that the names that are going out there, I think it's much more of a media story. But I think it really is a lesson that
yeah,
you've got to be tight, and you've got to be smart, and you got to do your research, and then you also have to treat people. You have to treat people well. Like, we got to get out of this internet culture of like everyone's got to be brought down whenever there's a disagreement. We've got to stop doing that. Yeah.
or the NAFO. I mean, the whole NAFO thing. The swarm of bots to insult and I mean, come on, man. No, look, the bottom line is February 19th was trying to present a delicious sausage to the people. A sausage, of course, being a mixture of meats brought together and all that stuff. And that's fine. Sausage tastes good, and they could have produced a delicious sausage. But then they showed everybody how sausage was made. And once you see how sausage is made, you're never going to eat the sausage because it's disgusting. And bringing all these disparate political beliefs together is making sausage. And there will be disagreements. There will be heated disagreements. There will be knockdown, drag out fights, but it needs to happen behind closed doors. The sausage factory should never be exposed to the public. You should simply say, here's our delicious sausage. And everybody goes, oh, this is really good. But instead, we dragged everybody through a tour they didn't want to be a part of. And they're going, that's disgusting. I'm never going to eat this.
And then they're getting back, all the bacteria, they're exposed. They're getting exposed where they're exposing them, and then the sausage gets poisoned. It's like well, that's a great metaphor, honestly, Scott. It's just like
you can have it. I just made it up, but it's yours.
It's amazing. I mean, it is really true because then you let the internet, public opinion, all of that come in, which of course we know that the internet and public opinion, this social media landscape is very much infiltrated and controlled heavily by the forces that want to see us dead or gone, or whichever is best, whichever works first. So, it does. You're right. This stuff should not have been a problem, but it is. And so, yes, I think the last word for me on this, I'll let you have the last word on this, is if the rally's going to happen, go to the rally. So, check it out, see what it's like, have your eyes open, but at the same time, just understand that there will be fallout. There already has been a lot with just so many organizations in it, and that this will have to be dealt with. How you deal with it really matters too. For me, it's like how you do that. Are you going to go on YouTube and use your platforms to just rail on certain organizations or whatever, or talk about why you all disagree and never come together? Well, sure, there'll be some who do that, and that's their prerogative. But how real people, not people who are personalities, not libertarians who are trying to build what I think has always been a failed party, and honestly a failed idea overall. It's like, if if you do see these disagreements, have them. How you go about them, how you walk that path, it's going to matter, because we should be really focused on those folks who are seeing what's going on, may not understand, may not have been involved before, but are understanding that something is really wrong here. They're building a criticism of, there's more people, I think, like this than maybe ever before, seeing what's going on, seeing what's wrong. The Ukraine situation is out of control. The risks are really high. We should be trying to reach out to those people and, do what we can to help them understand and get them on their own path, so that if we have more of a collective mass of people who are willing to genuinely and authentically stand up to the war machine. I think that's That's my last word on this. Do you have any last words on this? I know we're getting to a late hour here for you and me.
I'll end with this, and it might sound a little self-serving, but there is actually a method to my madness. In March of 1991, April actually, no, late March, early April, when the Gulf War was over, General Al Gray, who was the commandant of the Marine Corps, spoke for the Marine Corps intelligence activity, and he singled out a young captain as one of the best intelligence officers in the Marine Corps, and that captain was me. Um, and I was very proud of that. I mean, it was a big moment. But people need to understand that that captain, when he was a lieutenant, failed many times. Failed, and some of the failures should have been career-ending failures. And yet, people allowed me to learn from my mistakes, to pick myself up, dust myself off, be retrained, and then to move forward, to make a mistake again, and then to fall down, pick up. And so the journey to getting this great accolade was a journey of failure, a journey marked by failures. There were many successes, but there were many failures. But the difference was none of the failures, and they could have been had we had lesser officers, lesser leaders who viewed failure as fatal. If you make a mistake, if you fail, it's all over. No, the Marine Corps was the only way to learn is to try and fail. Understand how much knowledge is being imparted if all you do is succeed. You've never actually learned adversity. So I failed repeatedly on that journey, and I was given the opportunity to learn from my mistakes and move forward. So does that mean that the failures were failures? No, the failures were opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Opportunities. So I want to leave people with this on February 19th. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity, and you have to view it as an opportunity. If you go in there and expect it to be perfect, it ain't going to be perfect. And if you treat it as a failure because it didn't meet all of your objectives, dreams, hopes, aspirations, then you're doing the wrong thing. February 19th is the first time diverse political groups have tried to come together, and they are making mistakes, but that's the only way you learn. If you go to February 19th, or if you don't go, let's say, Danny and I are going to take a step back and look at it, but we're going to look at it hopefully from the standpoint of how can we make this better? How can we improve this down the road? Because ultimately, an anti-war movement that is only based upon the left or only based upon the right is never going to succeed. An anti-war movement to succeed is going to have to be broad spectrum. It's going to have to bring all people in. And this is not an easy task. This is almost an impossible task. But in order to do it, you're going to fail many, many, many times. And if you allow these failures to be treated as fatal, then there will not be an anti-war movement. If there's going to be an anti-war movement, every failure has to be learned as a learning, or viewed as a learning opportunity. Mistakes were made. Learn from the mistakes. Adapt. Try again. Fail again. Pick yourself up. Adapt. And keep failing until you get to the point that you need to be at. And when you get there, you're going to be much stronger. It's like a piece of steel getting tempered by fire, beat up, beat up, beat up, tempered by fire, beat up. In the end, you have the strongest steel in the world. And if we want an anti-war movement that's actually going to be an anti-war movement, then we're going to have to be tempered by fire. And on February 19th, I think it's the first time the blade's going to be dipped into the furnace, and it's going to fail. But that's not a bad thing. That's actually a good thing. It's good to fail because you identify problems. And if we all collectively can learn from these problems, then one day there will be something called an anti-war movement up there that can have real meaningful impact on the military industrial complex, which we all claim that we're in opposition against.
Yeah. Yeah, no, those are all very, very astute points, Scott. I think it's good to leave it here because this this is an event. It's good that it's happening. It's probably inevitable that there are going to be these problems. We have to be aware of them. We have to talk about them, but we have to be smart about it. Like we have to be. I think for me, I like I always get called like a CCP agent, a Communist Party of China. I know you get called a Putin this, Putin that. I've been called a little less of that, although that's been the case for me as well. But I like to study winners. You know, like we're talking about Russia winning this war. But like when I think about even just the Chinese experience, what happened to them World War II, all that they've had to go through, the immense poverty, and then these huge ups and downs, mistakes, and then rising up, and mistakes, and then getting out of that. Like so much to learn there, and then you see now there's just this iron stability, like this iron strength. And now you have the United States getting unhinged about it, doing really ridiculous things
Shooting
to
down balloons.
media, these, whatever we think. I know some people thought it was an actual spy balloon. Some people agree with China. It's a meteorological unmanned aircraft, whatever it was. That's not even part of the, I think the real debate is that the United States was so fragile that it felt like it had to take down a balloon, steal the balloon, threw it in the water. I don't even know what they're gonna do with it. It would land it in the water. It might, whatever technology was in there might be completely bust. But um, you know, that happened, but you see China's stability, and for me, it's like one of the reasons why China has gotten so strong is that they bided their time. They were patient. They looked at the forces around them globally. They saw what there was a leadership that saw what they needed to do. They needed to cooperate with the West. They needed to protect themselves economically. They needed to do so many things to get strong. And so I think the anti-war movement should take heed to that. Anyone who's anti-war should take heed to this. Like, look at what you need to do for us to get strong. It doesn't mean that we have to publicly have all these like spats and divide ourselves up and say, don't go to the rally's bad, or the rally's good, or anything like that. Just move, buy time, move in a way, investigate, study, move in a way that positively brings what you want to see. And then good things can happen as people experience the same thing you're seeing and start to wake up. And this rally can be part of that. And then when you see the problems, listen to Scott Ritter, listen to people like myself to be able to understand why, the Libertarian Party probably isn't going to lead an anti-war movement in the U.S. But at the same time, we have to build up leadership that can do that. And the only way you can do that is by behaving in a certain way, behaving like someone who's serious, not someone who's just trying to get clicks and likes and money and attention or whatever the hell, like whatever the hell
Wait a
people are
minute,
trying.
you can get clicks and likes and money? Tell me about this.
But that's all I have to say. Any final words? I think we can go out together for this one.
No, Danny, thank you very much for having me. This has been a really cool conversation. I appreciate the opportunity to come on and speak to you and the people who tune in. And I wish you the best of luck. And who knows, maybe you'll be inviting me back down the road and we can have a follow-on conversation to see if any of the dots I connected were actually connected properly.
For sure. We'll have to get back together. We'll have to get back together very soon. Before we go, though, everyone, just a few announcements. I will be on a bit of a break. That's the reason why I can't really go to the rally. I will not be anywhere near DC when it happens. So a lot of people are like, Danny, why aren't you going? Why aren't you going? It's like, the major reason is I'm just not going to be geographically capable. So I'm going to be on a break. I need a big break. So I won't even be back streaming until let's see, the week of the 20th at some point. So I'll be back sometime early that week. With that said, everyone, though, before you leave, make sure you are liking this video before you go. Help boosting it. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the notifications bell. And if you support independent journalism, you support real anti-war journalism. I call myself an anti-imperialist. Be sure to support this work. Costs always go up when you start to do a program like every single day, every week. So the costs are piling up. So please do subscribe. Patreon.com/Danny Haifong is the best place. But you can find so many good places to support in the description of this video. And, be sure to know that there are a lot of things you can do. Suggest guests, ask questions of guests like you saw today with our great friend here, Scott Ritter, and so much more. So consider supporting. But with that said, everyone, Scott and I are going to peace out of this live stream. Again, really good to be with you, Scott. Good to be with all of you in the chat and everyone who's been viewing. Take care. Have a good night.